In the beginning of Rafe Mair's online book about death and dying, he confesses the thought of dying is not a cheery prospect, but we will all do it, and until we do, in spite of faith, we have no idea what, if anything, happens when we breathe our last. That eternal question in a TV show he hosted called The Search set him searching for some answers. His research, reflections, and some humor are wrapped in his online book he calls The Home Stretch. It is my pleasure to welcome Rafe Mair back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Fanny, great to be with you. Nice to see you.
Happy 80th birthday.
Oh, can't we forget that?
I don't.
Actually, it's the 40th anniversary of my 40th birthday. So
well, of course it is.
Better, yeah.
Absolutely. But it set you a searching, not that you haven't always been a searcher, but at a certain point when you do the math, you figure out, yep, this is the home stretch.
Well, I was doing a show called The Search for Channel 10, an idea I had that because we're all searching, wanted to have a priest and then have a whatever come on, and I'd interview them. And I got so much research done at the end of the show that I thought, you know, I think there's a book here. And but I wanted to do a book that wasn't theological or anything like that, just on how I have gone through the search myself. And there we are.
How did it change your thoughts about death, about dying, about your future when you do go?
Who says I'm going?
Well, that's it, isn't it? We're all in denial.
We're all in denial. Well, it changed in one very material thing, Fanny. I decided that I need not worry about the various tenets of faith in various different religions. And I did that by rereading the New Testament. And let me tell people, I'm not trying to convert anybody here today. If anybody needs converting, it's me. But as I went through that, I came in both in Luke and I think in Mark, where Jesus is being tested by the lawyer. What law should we obey? And he said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God, etc. Thou shalt love the neighbor as thyself. And everybody forgets the next line. Upon these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Not that there it is, that's the message. You know, he's speaking to dumb people like me. And he's really saying, in essence, don't worry about all this doctrine that creates the priesthood. If you can obey those two rules, and I'll bet you can't, but if you can obey those two, you're home free. And so that's where I came to. I shed all concerns about trinities and virgin deaths and bodily ascensions and that sort of thing, and came down to what I think is the essential measure of Jesus. Now, I still don't think I believe that he's God and all those other things, but I believe he was a great teacher, and that those are the two, or that is the great lesson. Most
of our children have asked us, as you know, is there a God? If there is a God, does God have a mom? How does it all work? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Is there a real devil?
Well, in the book, I treat with all of those things, and interestingly enough, to find the answer to hell, I read Revelation, and that's a very scary chapter.
Sure is.
A scary book. And I found a guy named Herbert W. Armstrong, and he started a radio ministry way, way back. And his son, many of you may remember as Garner Ted Armstrong, used to do little stories. And he happened to have fluency in ancient Greek. So I didn't care where he came from or what he was, if he could explain this, and he does. So for those of you who are worried about Revelation, take a look at the book and see what Herbert W. Armstrong has to say.
You studied and to say studied, I mean lightly studied theologically, but you went into what Hindus believe and Sikhs and Jains and spiritualists, all of the above.
Well, it's interesting, Fanny, and again, I touched upon them. I didn't do any analysis. But what I found interesting was, why do we think we're more civilized because we only have one God? What's the matter with other gods? And even those of us who believe in one God admit of a devil, or a lot of people do, so that's two people involved in this whole exercise. So who's to say there aren't plenty of others? Don't say there are, Fanny. I'm simply saying that that's an open question and should remain one.
And one we should discuss is there one master or many masters of wisdom? Was there a real Jesus walking the earth? You've talked to Tom Harper,
yes.
Anglican priest, former Anglican priest, so have I. And he says he doesn't think that there really was a man named Jesus. And I'm sure he gets a lot of letters.
Yeah.
A lot of letters about that one from the Christians.
I don't agree with Tom on that, and he knows it. I think the evidence is overwhelming. And to think how quickly he and Muhammad proselytized their message around the world, there had to be something to him for that to happen. And I think he was there. But I suppose even if he wasn't, the message is still the right one.
When you looked at all of the mainline religions, was there a belief that runs through all? Do we all have a soul? Does every human have a soul? Does a dog have a soul?
Well, that was an interesting part. A lot of the book is done on the question of the soul, and I think surely nearly all religions believe that there is one. I'm not quite sure about Jews, but most of the other religions believe in that. But, you know, that remains to be seen. We just don't know. And we're not going to know. We may not ever know. We may just go into that long, dreamless sleep. But we're not going to know until after it's over.
And if we all have a soul, is there such a thing as an evil soul? Can you reform a soul? A Hitler, a Pol Pot, a Stalin? Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. I touch upon that, and I had a hard time writing it because the three men that you mentioned, along with Clifford Robert Olson, have got to be the worst people I've ever thought of in my life. But in the book, one of the people that I quote says, look, it's not up to you to judge. You don't know whether these people were mentally ill and screw loose, tightened up, they might have been different, et cetera. So trouble yourself with your own soul rather than the souls of people that you don't like very much. But I can only say this, Fanny, that there was one enterprising doctor decided that he would measure the soul. And he weighed this poor guy as he was turning his toes up.
That's right.
And he found that after there was three-quarters of an ounce lighter, which isn't terribly it's compelling evidence, but in any event, but the soul and the pre-death experiences they occupy more of the book than a lot of others, and perhaps too much of it.
Well, the near-death experience is an interesting experience. I had one, didn't see the light. Didn't find nirvana, didn't get a message. Maybe I wasn't that close. Maybe my heart didn't actually stop. My brain wasn't so good, but I don't know. But many have.
Well, there's a lot of evidence to indicate that it's true, Fanny. One of the interesting interviews I did some years ago was with a child psychiatrist. And he recounted to me children that had near-death experiences, such that they actually went outside the hospital. I could tell people what was on the wall of the side of the hospital or what was in the next room and that sort of thing. Now, all of those things can be faked. I mean, everything can be faked. But somewhere along the line, you've got to say, look, this guy had no reason to give that sort of evidence unless he believed it. So I think that the evidence for some kind of other world is very, very compelling indeed.
Well, certainly when you talk to a medium, and when we were in the radio game, we had David Young on a lot, and he would talk to our mothers and our dead father, anybody around us who had died, and bring them back and tell us the messages. And it was pretty spooky, I have to say.
You know, one of the statements made by the Mormons is that we get reunited with our loved ones. And I started to think, well, look, there's some loved ones that I don't really want to be reunited with, and they don't want me to reunite with them. Ex-wives and things.
Exactly. Well, it can get, maybe it'll get messy up there in that heaven, if there is a heaven. But I know you had a terrible tragedy in the course of your life, in the course of your journey, when you lost your daughter, Sean.
Yeah. She was killed in a car accident in 1976, Fanny, and a week or so later, a young friend of hers, young male, but not her boyfriend, came to me and said, do you mind if I talk to you about Sean? And I said, no, of course I don't. Well, he said, I talked to her after she'd gone, and she said, tell my mom and dad that I'm sorry, but I'm happy. And several months later, I was the MLA at the time, and I was aware that my people were trying to keep somebody from me. And I said, no, let me talk to her. Well, she lived a zillion miles, and this kid didn't know the kid. She said, I'm a psychic, and I want you to know that after your daughter died, whom I didn't know, she came to me and said, tell my mom and dad that I'm sorry, but that I'm happy. And you know, again, you can always explain that if you're a skeptic, that two people got together to pull this fraud off, etc. But then that coupled with the fact that I in fact saw a ghost makes me absolutely certain that there is a life hereafter and that there are some lines of communication. Do you want me to tell you about the ghost quickly?
Yes, I want you to tell me about the vision.
Yeah,
Rafe Mair vision.
Well, I don't know that it was a vision. I woke up one night, probably around midnight or somewhere, I'm not quite sure when, and there was a lady standing in the doorway. Now, this is the summertime. We don't have blinds, so it's very, very light. And as I looked at her, I said, what are you doing here? I wasn't at all afraid. I went to turn the light on, and she faded away. So I told this story, of course, to Wendy, and she told some of the neighbors. And one of
Who's your loving wife?
That's my loving wife.
Your soulmate.
Yeah, my soulmate, no question. And this lady said, well, would he recognize this lady? He said, well, try him. So she brought me a picture of about 8 or 10 different people at a party, all having a great time. I said, that's her right there. And my neighbor said, you know, she lived at your place. She had it before you did. And she either died or committed suicide in the bathroom right next to your home. And you know, I was astonished. And I said, well, the only thing I don't understand is she was wearing a very strange hat. And she said, the neighbor said, well, she was a nurse. It was probably her nursing hat. And of course it was. But I saw her, there's no question about that, Fanny, and I know people guffaw and so on, but guffaw away. I was there and I saw it.
Well, I have friends who have had similar experiences, and the point is they know things like she was wearing a hat. Then somebody says, well, she was a nurse, and you think, okay, like I haven't done drugs today.
No.
There's no reason for me to lie about this. I'm sober, and so you have it. Rafe Mair, our guest. The Home Stretch, his online book, it's published as an e-book, available online through Amazon.com, $9.99, a modest price. We'll come back and talk more.